Welcome back to Loosening Up, the KA-EMDR Podcast. I'm Danielle Ciccone, and today it's going to be just me and my guest. Michelle is not available today. She actually just returned from a 2-week meditation retreat, so she is, kind of slowly integrating herself back into normal life. So today it's just going to be me with my guest. Her name is Jessica Chacon, and she is in Colorado. She took our introductory ketamine assisted EMDR course in March of last year when we taught it live. So she was one of our couple of live cohorts. And then she joined us for our experiential training in August of last year, 2025. And then I had the chance to have her in a consultation group in the fall. And it was really cool to hear how she was implementing this. So I'm excited to interview her, excited to hear how things are progressing, how it's going with her and her clients. I think you'll enjoy hearing how she has sort of taken this and ran with it. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hey, Jessica. Good to see you today.
Hello. Good to see you too. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's just start with kind of an introduction, whatever you want to share about you and your practice.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. My name is Jessica Chacon and I live in Southern Colorado. I currently have an integrative wellness studio, which is downtown here in Alamosa, Colorado. So I'm like right on the border of New Mexico and really beautiful rural area.
Mm.
I've had a brick and mortar integrative wellness center for going on 5 years now, and it is the house of my psychotherapy practice and a yoga studio. And we have a
Mm.
couple really awesome massage therapists who work there. And so, I opened this integrative wellness center after seeing a really big need in community mental health to bring the community back in,
Mm.
and to also bring more integrative practices into the space as well. So,
Mm.
yeah, that's really my my big baby that I take care of on the daily. But I also offer integrative trauma immersions and EMDR and ketamine assisted EMDR intensives as well that maybe we
Mm.
can drop in and talk a little bit about today as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the reasons I wanted to invite you is I remembered when we were in our consultation group that you were sharing a little bit about kind of how you've structured it. And I thought
Mhm.
that was really neat. So hopefully we'll get a chance
Mm.
to talk about that. Um, so tell me a little bit about kind of why you got interested in ketamine assisted EMDR. Like, were you practicing both separately? Had you already started to kind of play around with both of them before you took our training? Or like just kind of what prompted you
Mm.
to explore this particular integration of the two?
Yeah, so I've been practicing EMDR for about 7 years, going on 8, and I love EMDR. It's one of my main modalities that I utilize in my practice. So, having the familiarity with that was kind of a big thread that led me there.
Mm-hmm.
But, I did the IPI integrative psychiatry program with you, and I saw that you all were offering ketamine assisted EMDR. And what really perked my ears up was I wasn't quite sold on the ketamine assisted therapy ways in which that was being utilized. I know there's lots of really positive, results that clients are receiving, but I felt like there were other medicines that
Mm-hmm.
I preferred to work with in the psychedelic realm with clients.
Mm-hmm.
And ketamine wasn't quite that.
Mm-hmm.
And, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I started running EMDR intensives, I had an inkling that maybe a little microdosing of some psilocybin could be potential for softening some clients who were coming in a little bit defensive, or softening some clients who needed a little bit more support getting out of their head and into their bodies. And so, there were a couple of self-administrative retreats that these clients were really interested in doing that work. And I noticed a really profound difference in their
Mm-hmm.
EMDR,,, than, if they were just, straight up doing EMDR. So there was something there. I didn't quite know how I was getting there tracking. And so when you all announced this ketamine assisted EMDR, I was like, "Oh, there it is, like, someone
Mm,
else catching the little train that's moving here,"
yeah.
and I just was like, "I need to do this because
Mm,
these women are onto something."
huh.
Um, and yeah, when I took the training, it just was, like, made so much sense and really blew my mind and, got to experience it for myself, and, um, it's just really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. So, had you ever worked with ketamine at this low of a dose prior to implementing this particular model?
No, I never worked with ketamine at this low dose. I was familiar with the psycholytic approach. I had
Mhm,
a couple of providers who were in some of my IPI mentorship groups who were working
mhm,
with psycholytic ketamine and were, really believed in it and talked a lot about it. But I hadn't quite jumped into that realm. And so really I had only done high doses of ketamine
yeah.
up until this point.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that seems to be the most common. Either people haven't worked with ketamine at all when they come to us, or they have had the experience of kind of the higher dose journey style. And maybe they've heard about psycholytic, but I think most people that we've met through our program, they've never worked with ketamine at this low of a dose. And I think for a lot of people, they're pretty surprised at
Mhm.
like kind of how just that small amount seems to add like a pretty profound benefit. So I'm just curious if that was
Absolutely.
your experience.
Mhm. Yeah, great question. I've very much through my life been more of like the secrets are in the subtle. I
Mm,
feel like
mhm.
when we go low and slow, we actually capture a lot more potency. And we live in a
Yeah.
society that's like, send it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
Mhm.
I think that a lot of the reason why many people's nervous systems are where they are right now is because we have taken these very, I'll use the word masculine approaches
Mm,
to the ways that we've done therapy and also in the psychedelic world, there's a
mhm.
lot of talk about these heroes doses. And
Mhm.
honestly, I don't think a lot of people are ready to go there
Yeah.
and they're not resourced enough to go there. And so the low dose made sense to me, and I live in an area where, this kind of work is very new to
Mhm.
people, and so being able to offer a low dose actually helps the clients feel like, "Okay, I'm gonna be more in control."
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think I remember somebody on your previous podcast naming that, and so
Mhm.
there's actually a sense of safety being built within themselves just through knowing that there's gonna be a low dose.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I mean, I've really seen because when I first started offering CAP, I wasn't really doing psycholytic work because I had heard about it, but just honestly didn't know how to do it or what to do. So I was just kind of offering what I was taught in the IPI program, kind of these journeys. And people were interested. I definitely got interest and I had a good number of clients that tried it. But I've really noticed that since I started actually focusing on psycholytic and kind of um, not pushing it, but like talking about that more, I'm actually getting a lot more interest, and a lot more people seem to feel like, oh, okay, that's something that actually interests me. That's something
Mhm.
that I think I can actually navigate and approach, whereas that, the other approach, like just, it can just feel really scary for people because most of my clients,
Absolutely.
they have pretty complex trauma. So
Mhm. And
it's,
there's a
it's
time and a
hard.
place for, scaling the medicine up and doing the psychedelic work, going on a journey. Um,
Hmm.
and, I definitely think there's great benefit to that.
Yeah.
What I've been playing with the ketamine EMDR and talking about it is like I do a lot of threshold work, right? Like a lot
Mm,
of clients come to us in the midst of some kind of big change in their
hmm.
life. Something has been shifting and being uncovered here. And just being in the threshold alone in your life is a really
Mm,
scary place to be. And
sure.
so it's like EMDR is on by itself on this side can be very powerful, but you're in your sober mind
Mhm.
where your defenses, your managers have much more access to you. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes is what's keeping them stuck in their lives. And then we have like this, psychedelic experience, which is far out here in this space
Mhm.
where they may not be in a place where they can quite understand all of the downloads they're receiving because,
Right.
life is happening right here. And so I think the
Mhm.
ketamine EMDR kind of holds both.
Yep.
And it
Exactly.
feels like it's kind of the threshold between the two, if you're
Yeah.
catching what I'm putting down here.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of what we talk about a lot is that it seems so much easier to kind of actually integrate what
Mhm.
what actually comes up versus kind of the stark contrast of
Mhm.
my ordinary state of consciousness and then my wildly non-ordinary state, which can be like you're saying really powerful, and there can be a time and a place, and it can be some incredible stuff can happen, but making that connection and integrating it is hard for a lot of people.
Mhm.
So this approach, what I've observed is it kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like meeting in the middle, and there can be expansiveness and shifts and perspective, changes and like a new experience, but
Mhm.
it's not such a stark contrast from
Mhm.
kind of your normal state of consciousness that it can't easily be integrated. So
Mhm.
I think that's kind of what you're
Yeah,
speaking to.
absolutely.
Um, yeah. So, and actually for that reason, I much prefer it these days.
Mhm.
So it's really cool to hear that you're kind of seeing that too.
Mhm.
Um, I'm curious if you want to share a little bit about the experiential training because, most of the people that we've talked to have, in fact, I think everybody that we've talked to about this has said what an important element that was, right? Like actually getting to kind of be, well, in both roles, the therapist role practicing it, but actually like kind of being in that client role.
Mhm.
I'm just curious if you would be open to sharing a little bit about what that was like for you, or if that felt like an important piece of the learning or kind of,
Absolutely.
adopting this?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that we can only take our clients as far as we have been.
Yeah.
And it's hard to talk about the experience that is taking, especially a non-ordinary state
Mhm.
experience. It's hard to be able to talk about something like that unless you've really experienced it and have the
Yeah.
language and embodied understanding of that. So
Right.
I always think experiential trainings are important no matter what we're doing.
Yeah.
But for me personally, taking that was yeah, really potent. I actually, at the time, was moving through some of my own personal pieces
Mm.
around really starting to step into this work and like
Mm.
marketing that I'm working with ketamine or marketing that I'm
Mhm.
working with medicines and marketing this alternative therapy type of work in a very rural, sometimes
Yeah.
closed-minded
Mm.
community. And so I was like, I'm going to come to this training with something really real that's going on for me.
Yep.
And one of the cognition that I worked with was around, um, I'm gonna get in trouble. And,
Mm.
um, yeah, it was really powerful for me to go through that. And within one session, I floated back through moments in childhood, but I also floated back to like what I will call a witch wound. I felt
Mm.
like I
Mhm.
was able to go further back beyond my present
Wow.
ancestors to further ancestry to see that like this notion of doing alternative therapies lives actually
Mm.
really deep within our psyches and our
Mhm.
bones, especially as women.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
and I was like, whoa, for me to be able to go back and see that within a 45-minute window was just
Wow.
really epic. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and so from just that one session, me being able to take that and of course do my own personal work with my therapist and integrate
Mhm.
in my own life, I was able to then work with that in a deeper way
Mhm.
and realize that there was this story that didn't serve me that
Mm.
I needed to move beyond to be able to do this work, to be able to
Wow.
offer it and announce it and share it with my community.
How cool is that? That's really
Yeah.
awesome to hear that. So glad you had that experience. I'm curious, and of course, I know you'll never really know, but do you think that that level of connection or that level of depth could have happened without the medicine? Like just kind of knowing yourself, do you think you would have gone there, you know, maybe eventually
Mhm.
without medicine? Or did it feel like, wow, this really opened up something that I don't know that I ever would have really discovered? Like, what's your sense about that? And again, I know we'll never know because, you took the medicine, but I'm just curious, kind of looking
Yeah.
back, what's
Yeah,
your
it's a good
sense about that?
question. I think for who I am and like the kind of, work that I do and my spiritual connections, I do think I may have gotten to that space at some point or another. But
Yeah.
to like, what happened in the ketamine EMDR session was I was actually having somatic things come up with my throat. Like I was actually
Mm,
coughing
mhm,
um, during the session, and the coughing led to, some images that came up
mm,
around that. And even though I've seen inklings through some of my, bigger medicine work that I've done,
mhm.
that felt like it did lead me to something very specific. And
Yeah.
I will say that maybe I could have got there in an EMDR session at some point, but the ketamine, I do think, gave me a straight
Mm,
line towards that
mm.
very specific story that's held within my throat.
Yep.
Yeah.
There is something that somebody said in one of our experiential trainings, and I wish Michelle was here because she probably would remember. It was something like one of the students said something like, it feels like a super highway to the source, I think is
Mhm.
what she said, or something very similar, where she just kind of had a similar experience where it was like she could kind of go back to kind of what seemed like the original wound, I
Mhm.
guess you would call it, right? Kind of the
Mhm.
source of the distress. And I thought that was a really cool way to say it. And I've definitely experienced that and seen that
Yeah.
happen. And it's not to say that we can't get to these places without the medicine. I think
Mhm.
EMDR is incredibly powerful and we can do really cool things without the medicine, but it just seems to kind of honestly kind of expedite it or
100%.
just
Mhm.
get there sooner and a little more
Yeah.
easily, with a
One
little
of
more
my
clarity.
favorite things about the ketamine EMDR is the accessibility in various realms. One of them
Mhm.
being that what sometimes would take 3 to 6 months to get clients to
Mhm.
pinpoint is literally happening in one session,
Yep.
if not 2. And of course,
Yep.
even though we're getting there in 1 to 2 sessions, like, we're working with it over a couple
Right.
sessions, but the the highway straight to the root really does happen in a single session, and that's been part of, what has sold me on this. It's
Mm.
like, wow, this is really incredible how quick it's opening up to the root of the issue
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
Um, and on the note of accessibility, it's also like ketamine therapy has been very expensive for many people.
Yeah.
I know people have spent thousands of dollars on doing the
Mhm.
ketamine work, and they're not they're like, "Well, I think it helped with my mood, but, like, this thing is still
Mm.
here, and I can't afford to keep spending thousands of dollars." And so being able to offer this modality, it's like my provider, she charges $350 for the assessment, takes
Mhm.
insurance for that. The
Right.
medicine costs $50.
Yeah.
So getting it off the ground is a little bit expensive for some people who may not be as abundant. But
Yeah.
then I don't charge anything extra for
Mhm.
a ketamine session. My 90-minute session
Mhm.
for talk psychotherapy is the exact same
Mhm.
for ketamine assisted EMDR. And so
Yeah.
I do think that's like very special for the accessibility piece.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was something Michelle and I really appreciated is that this can be done in a session that's not that much longer than a typical
Mhm.
session. I mean, you definitely need more than, your typical 50 or even 60 minutes. But I've
100%.
been able to do it with some people in 75 minutes,
Mm,
if we can kind
great.
of really stay on track. I prefer to have an hour and a half because that just gives us a little more spaciousness, but
Mhm.
it is definitely more accessible than what I think you and I were probably both taught, which is like 2, 3, mostly 3-hour sessions. And
Mhm.
honestly, I don't know that I ever felt that I needed that much time. So I find it kind of interesting that that's how it's taught, because that seems to be a
Mhm.
pretty common instruction, is to schedule 3-hour sessions for the higher dose stuff. And it's just
Mhm.
really hard to do that on any kind of regular basis, you know? So,
Yeah. So
I
accessible for the client, but also for us as therapists, because I mean,
yeah.
burnout is so real, especially
Oh, yeah.
in this day and age when we're all moving through very similar issues, you know?
Absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to say on the accessibility piece is like what the I had a client who I'd been doing a lot of work with for, multiple, I think maybe even a year. I was working with him, and he was very excited about this ketamine assisted EMDR, and after our first 5 sessions with ketamine EMDR, he's like, "I'm great. I don't need to do more therapy." And like he left, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like he saved so much money on
Yes.
therapy because he found something that actually went directly to
Mm,
what the root was, worked on it, and he's doing great.
mhm. That's
Mhm.
so cool. Yeah, and I mean,
And
honestly, that might scare some therapists, right? Because it's like, "Oh, man, I'm gonna have to have a lot of people, like, coming through the door." But, I mean, we wanna do work that's actually helpful, right? I know
Mhm,
for me, as much as I love my clients and I love having long-standing relationships with them. I do. I don't want people to feel like they have to be in therapy forever. I really
absolutely.
don't, you know?
Mhm,
And I know some people just like therapy. I know I do, and so they don't mind kind of staying in it for a long periods of time. The relational aspect feels so important. But I really do want to be able to offer something that is actually what I like to refer to as like transformational, right? To where
mhm,
there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and we can
mhm,
see where we're going and what we're trying to accomplish, and we can tell when we get there, and we
mhm,
kind of know when it's done, you know?
mhm.
So, um, I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean, they
yeah,
train you in
it's
grad school to say, your job as a therapist is to make sure you don't have a job. However,
mhm,
we have, living in a post-capitalist
mm,
colonial society that actually didn't feel like it was ringing true because
yeah,
there was a lot of, money investment in the mental health systems. And so
mhm,
I'm all about, decolonizing our practices in the
mm,
best ways that we can. And one of those is like, can I make therapy and healing
mhm,
access more affordable and
mhm,
that people don't have to rely on me, that they can come,
mm,
they can receive what they need, and then they become their own
yeah,
healer truly.
absolutely, yeah. So, how have you rolled it out? Do you want to share a little bit about kind of your structure, like what you have found that works for your practice, for your clients, as you've
Mhm.
implemented this specific model?
Yeah, so, when I first took the training, which, gosh, was that almost 2
It was
years?
March of last year.
March of last
So, yeah,
last year?
I know, right? So much has
Only 1
happened in just a year.
Yeah, so last year when I first took the training, what I did was I developed kind of like a package.
Hmm.
So I created, kind of an informational sheet, and at the very end, I had, um kind of a payment that, my current clients could make that saved them money, and
Mm,
that was kind of like a thank you to, like, being my client
mm,
for so long, and I have this new modality that I'm still kind of learning, and we're gonna do
hmm,
this together, and so it felt like this reciprocal way of rolling out something
mm,
new.
hmm,
Um, and, I had 5, 6 clients who said yes pretty immediately. Um, and then for, newer clients, I do offer a packaging way that they can do this work so I can get their commitment
hmm,
for, 6 to 10 to 12 sessions saying like,
hmm.
this isn't a one, even though we're talking
Yeah,
about it being really quick, it is not a one and done. And
right.
prior to even doing the ketamine work, I need you to commit to, 3 to 4 minimum where we're
Hmm.
doing resourcing and we're still doing the first parts of EMDR. So,
Right.
um, I have kind of unrolled it in that way. Um, I haven't really had to do a lot of marketing on it. Word of
Yeah.
mouth, like the power of this medicine
Mhm.
this modality has done the work itself.
Mhm.
Now most people who are coming to me have been referrals from past clients.
Mhm.
There are some people that are looking for something very specific and do find me on my website.
Yeah.
But the work has, you know, done the work itself.
Yeah.
And I am currently transitioning my practice to really only doing this work.
Mm.
And so I see it as being a little bit supplemental to people's therapy. So, you can have your weekly therapist, and something comes up, you're starting to feel stuck, you can't quite figure out
Mhm.
how to get there, or, you're working with your therapist and you find something very specific you want to work on,
Mhm.
come see me, we'll work together for X amount of time. We'll get this work done, and then you get to go back to your therapist.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the model that I'm transitioning towards. And of course, if I get new clients who want to stay on as my regular client, there's opportunity to
Mhm.
talk about that if it feels like a good fit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I see that as a sustainable way for me to continue offering this, because there aren't a lot of people around me and probably
Mhm.
3-hour radius that
Wow.
this specific work. So it feels like
Wow.
I want to be able to also, not have a revolving door, but have space for more people to
Exactly.
be able to receive this. Then my caseload is full for a year, and
Exactly. Yep.
know, yeah.
Right. Yeah, because honestly, that's something I've struggled with too. I'm kind of moving in that direction as well. I have some clients still that, don't do this work. I've been working with them for a while, and that's okay. But eventually I kind of hope to move in that same direction because there's just a lot of people that need this kind of
Mhm.
help. And like you're saying, if our capacity is always full, it's we don't get to service many people. So I actually really like the way you're talking about it. And I think this lends itself really well to kind of that more intensive type of work, right? Where
Mhm.
maybe somebody might do, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, I don't know, something like that of work that is more intensive. And there's more depth and we're
Mhm.
using this model. And then maybe, they kind of work through whatever they want to work through. Maybe they do typical talk therapy for a little while. Maybe they take a break from therapy. Maybe they come back at some point
Mhm.
in the future if they find that there's another piece of work they want to do. Right. So I can see this being commonly practiced in that way. Um, although, there's some people that I think could and would benefit from doing this for a longer chunk of time. Everybody's so different. And what I love about being in private practice is that I can kind of individualize it depending on,
Exactly.
what the person's resources are, what their goals are, the scope of what they want to work on, if it's something more specific versus something more, kind of comprehensive. So it's
Mhm.
cool to get to like be
Mhm.
creative and sort of do what works for that
Of
individual,
course.
you know?
Yeah, 'cause we're working on a spectrum of what people are coming in with, and
Yep.
somebody with complex PTSD, once we start getting in there, we're gonna be in there for a little while
Exactly.
because there's a
Yeah.
lot of different things, material that we can work on, and
Yeah.
we can take some breaks to integrate, but
Yeah.
somebody like that may need more support versus somebody who's like, "I know exactly what this is.
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
meant to be," and they can come in for a short period of time and then be
Yeah.
on their way.
Yep. Yeah. So it can totally be tailored.
Exactly.
Um, have you found any particular clinical presentations that you think this is kind of especially useful for? I mean, our position is we kind of think it honestly can enhance EMDR for darn near everyone. I mean, there are
Mhm,
contraindications, so this isn't literally for everyone, but
mhm.
we really have seen that it can expand what's possible for so many different types of clients. But have you noticed any particular kind of presentations that seem to be kind of do especially well with this?
Yeah, I'll say that the presentations that I see the most, probably because the way in which I share that I do therapy as a trauma-informed somatic therapist, right,
Mhm.
is that people are coming in with trauma, and so
Yeah.
but within that container is
Mhm.
anxiety and depression, um, and I have found that people who are feeling really stuck in depression after a couple of sessions felt like
Mhm.
the cloud lifted them.
Mm.
Honestly, I have a woman that I'm working with currently, who just has felt like her feet are stuck in the mud and a cloud
Mm.
is over her at all times. And
Yeah.
after the first session, she felt so light
Mm.
and it's just been life-changing for
Wow.
her. And I have, it helps with clients who have high levels of anxiety that sometimes when you're in therapy, you can get really heady or
Mhm.
really wordy,
Yeah.
or anxious to even go there. It just like softens them. And um, this past week, I had a client say, "Oh my gosh, I just feel so much peace and calm."
Mm.
And I was like, "When's the last time you felt that?" And she was like, "Never."
Yeah.
Like her nervous system's just like constant anxiety. And so to
Mhm.
have a remembrance of
Yes.
what calm and peace feels like in your body, like she can come back to that. It's
Exactly.
a big resource. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I feel like this is this is good for most everybody who it's not contraindicated for. I haven't
Mhm.
quite worked with anyone who, has any OCD tendencies around with ketamine yet, but I feel like it would be great. I feel like it would be great for, people with disordered eating.
Mm.
Because disordered eating has so many different defenses and
Yeah.
um, managers and exiled parts that are so loud all the time. And to be able to quiet those down for a moment, I think
Yeah.
we could do really great work inside of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Grief
um,
work
oh
with this
yeah.
medicine has been really amazing because grief is such a taboo um, thing in our society. We're such a grief-stricken
Mm.
society, and it's really hard for people to go there and like lift the lid
Mm.
off well, and
Mhm.
I think that the ketamine has helped to lift the lid and people can like be
Mhm.
in the well and swim a little bit
Mm.
and tears can move much easier. I've had quite a few people come to me with some big grief that they were
Yeah.
able to really tap into that they haven't quite got there yet. Mhm.
Absolutely. I've seen that too. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, what I'm thinking of as I'm listening to you is literally like kind of what we call this podcast, right? Like the loosening up. It really just seems
Mhm.
to help things like become,
Mhm.
I mean, malleable, right? So that
Mhm.
they can actually move and shift and resolve versus
Yeah.
just kind of staying in this really kind of often very rigid, defended survival, mode,
Mhm.
that kind of feels like it has to stay to hold the person up,
Totally.
this kind of helps
I'm
that soften so it can actually, like I said, kind of transform,
absolutely.
and then people can actually live, and thrive versus just kind of
Mhm.
being in that survival mode.
Mhm. Absolutely. I feel like this work is good for the times, like
Yeah.
grief and trauma and stress that so many people are working through, like,
Mhm.
the existential crisis through climate change. Like, I think it gives an opportunity to just soften all of the noise for a moment and
Mm.
just come back to self energy
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
you know, um, just take some reprieve from the current times. I'm also currently working with somebody who is navigating substance use, and
Mm. Mhm.
um, I have gotten a little creative recently because in doing some of the preparatory work for EMDR, noticing
Mhm.
that they were getting really stuck in storytelling and like really
Mhm.
hard to kind of get into the EMDR piece. And so I was like, okay, we have the ketamine. We're
Mhm.
going to do a higher dose of ketamine. So
Mm.
this person, it was in a bigger body. So we did about 250 milligrams, put on some music and set some intentions around the work and really around the substance use. And
Mhm.
we were able to go in and like pinpoint exactly what's
Mm.
causing the stressors and the triggers for the
Wow.
substance use. And from there, we created a target. So the next time that they come see me, we are then
Mhm.
ketamine assisted EMDR
Mm.
because we couldn't
Mhm.
quite get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was
Mm.
also cool to see how we can also move in and out of higher dose and lower dose.
Yeah, I think for some people that absolutely can work. I don't do a whole lot of that work anymore, but for
Mhm.
some people I do, and I think, like you've said, like there is a place for that and there's still benefit to it. I just really like this to be kind of the backbone of what we're
Mhm.
doing, but I can absolutely see how sometimes having a higher dose experience can sort of
Exactly.
elicit some things, or just shake things up a little bit more, right? In a way that
Mhm.
can be helpful. So, yeah, they don't have to be mutually exclusive, right? Like, I think the
Absolutely.
models can work together. I have just, and I'm probably biased because I learned EMDR first and I loved it before I ever started practicing CAP, but I just found that CAP by itself, without some sort of trauma processing modality, just didn't move things the way that I was hoping
Mhm.
it would, honestly. At first, I was really excited, like, oh, this is gonna be easy, like, oh, things are just gonna like spontaneously resolve. And they just didn't. I wasn't
I
seeing that with
agree.
any reliability. So I love the medicine. I think it's just one of the coolest medicines. I love that it has, different effects depending on the dose. I think the fact that it's got a pretty short half-life, like the effect is basically perfect for psychotherapy, right? I mean, it's just
Mhm.
so cool how people can have pretty big experiences in a pretty short amount of time and then be pretty much back to normal, fairly
Absolutely, and I
soon.
think
Like, it's great.
for sure,
Um,
coming back to that accessibility piece, right? Like, a lot of people in my community are, like, in 9 to 5 jobs with families, and
yeah.
they don't have the privilege of being able to, like, go on a big journey and, like, go
Mhm.
home and rest and, like, be in
Yeah.
that. It's like, "Hey, let's give you something," and then, you're gonna still be open and vulnerable, and
Yeah.
it's good to integrate and take care of yourself when you go home, but you're gonna still be able to go home and interact with your kids and your family
Right.
and make dinner,
Mhm.
and I think that's also really powerful and important,
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
so
like, life doesn't have to be on hold, right? I
exactly.
mean, of
Mhm.
course, we wanna be mindful of where are you going after the session? Who are you gonna be around? Is it gonna be supportive, or is it gonna actually
Mhm.
be, counter, like, productive to what we're doing? But, yeah, like, life doesn't have to just be put on hold,
Mhm.
Sure, would it be lovely if people can put all their stressors away, and just focus on healing? Yes, that would be lovely, but that is really
And then they
not.
probably wouldn't need healing.
That's true. Um, that's really not accessible. I mean, I can do that,
Yeah.
I've got 2 kids, I've got just a life, a lot of responsibilities, but I can do this with
Mhm.
my therapist,
Mhm.
and I can go home and I actually, whenever I do a session and I go home to my family, I have a great evening, right? Like, I do
Yeah.
have a really loving, wonderful husband and a good living environment, but, like, it can be easily integrated into
Agreed.
people's lives, which
Mhm.
is so cool because I think a lot of people, I'm guessing, have the idea, and I can understand why, that if they wanna do psychedelic therapy, they have to, like, go to the jungle and go on a retreat and, it's
Mhm.
gotta be this
Mhm.
big thing, and that's cool too, if people can do that, absolutely. But we can do something on kind of a smaller scale that can actually be just as profound in my experience,
Mhm.
that's a lot more accessible, you know?
Agreed.
So,
Mhm.
um, I just love it. I just love doing this work. So, okay, well, we should probably start wrapping up, even though I feel like we could chat forever. Anything else you feel like you want to touch on or share with anybody who might be listening, whether it's someone who is maybe considering this for themselves as a client, whether it's a therapist who's kind of curious about this? Like, could I do
Mhm.
this in my work? Anything else you want to impart based on your wisdom so far?
Hmm. I would say that if I'm going to speak to like potential clients who are interested in this work and, maybe feel a little nervous about the world of psychedelics, which seems to be really, growing in this field, is that this feels like a really safe way to step in, and titrate the experience. And if somebody is really looking for very, specific trauma work, attachment work, working specifically with, the nervous system's anxiety and depression, that this could be a really good fit, and if somebody is looking for more of that, like, soul work and to have a
Mm,
spiritual experience, that is where I would recommend high
mm,
doses to have more of a non-ordinary state. But
mm,
this to me, like, if we're really talking about bridging, the westernized way of doing psychotherapy
mhm,
with this medicine, like, this to me feels very embodied way of doing
mhm,
that. Um,
mm.
and yeah, try it out. It's really powerful.
Mm,
And for any therapist who is interested in this work, I highly recommend taking the training,
mm.
just experiencing it for themselves. And we can only talk about it so much. I think
Yeah.
really being able to see the awe
Mhm.
in the training, in the research, but more so in your own therapy room is,
Yeah.
will change your life as a therapist, but also
Mm,
start to really change the lives of your clients, which
mm.
then change the lives of our communities. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, Michelle and I have been just blown away. I mean, we're just so happy to see how this has kind of like rippled out. I mean,
Mhm.
every time I get to talk with somebody who's saying, "Yeah, I'm doing this," and like really big changes are happening, in so many different communities. And um, it just makes me so incredibly happy to hear it.
Absolutely. One thing, last thing I want to bring up too is that, like, I think in this we're like tooting the horn of the ketamine assisted EMDR, and you
Mhm.
know but we also need to make sure as therapists that we're not just jumping into something here with our clients. We still have to do the work to make sure clients are ready. If someone's never done
Absolutely.
therapy before, I'm not going to bring them in and we're going to just start off ketamine EMDR immediately. Like, there's a lot of
Right.
groundwork we need to do. And I have one client as well that I have been doing this work with for almost a year. And then they
Mhm.
had a really big life event come up that actually
Mhm.
spiraled them into some of their exiled places
Mm.
and had some suicide ideation resurface that hadn't surfaced since the first time we ever did ketamine EMDR. And so
Mhm.
also having the clinical judgment of saying, okay, let's pause. We're going to put
Right.
that modality down for a moment and we're going to come back to the drawing board because we have some new work to do here.
Mhm.
And so just continuing to have clinical judgment and not just do this because it's exciting and it
Right.
works, but you know,
Yep.
we have to
Yeah,
follow the nervous system of the person in front of us.
absolutely. Yeah, I think timing matters a lot.
Mhm.
When in the course of a person's life does it make sense to actually implement this? And yeah, I mean, we
Absolutely.
aren't really talking about it today, but Michelle and I tell people all the time, this is not something to just be rushed into. I mean, this is where the processing really happens. This is kind of like where there's a lot of action, a lot of movement, but to even get to the point where you're ready to implement this with someone takes a lot of
Mhm.
work. And it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be years for some
Mhm.
people, So yeah, I'm so glad you're speaking to that. And it's not a panacea, right? I mean, EMDR isn't, CAP isn't, and even the combination of them isn't.
Mhm.
So, we have to be still very thoughtful about when and with who do we do this, and to be really paying attention to like what's happening, what's coming up, how is the person tolerating it, you know? So I'm glad you're speaking to that because yeah, I'm pretty big on like making sure that we're doing this responsibly and with a lot
Okay.
of careful attunement and kind of individualizing it, to
Absolutely.
each person because everyone's a little different in
Mhm.
how they're going to respond. So, um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
well, I know we
thank
didn't
you.
talk about intensives, but if you wanna have another conversation,
Yeah,
and we can spend time just talking about that piece too. Or if
absolutely.
people wanna
Yeah.
reach out and have questions, I'm happy to share.
Yeah. Yeah. So how should people reach out? I mean, we'll put your information, in in the description, but what's
Mhm.
kind of the best way for people to find you or contact you if they have questions or want to chat about this? Maybe people that are looking to start therapy in Colorado.
Yeah. So, I have a website, sweetgrasstherapeutics.com. And people can find more information about me, find information about intensives there. Well, actually, that page is a little bit under construction, but here soon it'll
Okay.
be back up.
Okay.
Email is the best way to get a hold of me. There's plenty of links to email me
Hmm.
there. And the one-on-one work in person, obviously living in Colorado, but for the intensives pieces, people can fly in
Mm,
to Colorado and be here on my land and work with me in
mm.
my office. So that's an option too for people who are out of state.
That's great. Yeah, that's another thing I love about um, intensives is it opens up who can work with you, right? So I'm
Absolutely.
glad you mentioned that. Um, Well, thank you for coming. It was so good to see you and
Yeah,
kind of
so good
hear
to
how
see
this has
you.
continued to unfold because I haven't had a chance to talk with you in a little while. So I really appreciate your time and just and just how
Mhm.
you've like kind of taken this and made it your own. And I can tell that you are doing some really awesome work and the people who
Mhm.
are working with you, I imagine they are getting really good care. So I'm really, really happy to know that.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you,
thank you so
Danielle.
much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, till
Take good
next time.
care.
All
Yeah,
right.
I'm sure we'll talk again soon. All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Loosening Up, the KA-EMDR podcast. If you'd like to learn more, visit www.ketamineassistedemdr.com, where you can find out more about our research, our training programs, and you can also find a KA-EMDR therapist to work with.